Solo Leveling casually fixing one of its biggest issues that it's had for its story, and many fans of the actual webcomic and novel have had for years now, and I feel like I need to draw attention to it, because it is something that legitimately impressed me by this episode, and many people that have either went on to read the webcomic or have read the novel of Solo Leveling might have looked at this episode and not noticed anything different, because overall, it's been a long time since these chapters came out, but also the way the content is presented with this episode of Solo Leveling, it's so perfectly entwined and feels like it should be there. Like the content within this episode should have been there since the very beginning, and not something that was just anime original. And yeah, you heard me right. This episode was pretty much anime original. I would say about 85%, maybe more of the episode was just anime original content. And no, I'm not saying that this butchers anything. I'm not saying that this fundamentally changes anything with the story, like, ruins future plot points or anything like that. I'm saying the content that was added within this episode gave us content that should have been there since the very beginning of the story's inception, when it was written. And let's talk about the fundamental flaw that, was fixed here. So basically, if you are a Solo Leveling fan, even if you're an anime only, or if you are a webcomic reader or a novel reader, there is probably something you have heard from the community. You probably heard that Solo Leveling is a great power fantasy, but that's about it. It's basically a good-looking dish, it has some fun, badass moments with Jinwoo, but the overall characters are flat as cardboard. They really don't have much going for them, because it's basically a one-man show. That is typically the main complaint that Solo Leveling gets, that it doesn't have character development or characterization. It has a lot of cool character designs, a lot of cool stuff with the world and spells, etc., but there's not much really done with it, so to speak. It's only there to just amp up and allow Jinwoo to look like a badass. That's really the only thing, and that's a big complaint that, a lot of people have with Solo Leveling. And this episode casually fixes one of those fundamental issues. The anime original content gives much needed characterization and development to a lot of our characters within this story. Characters that are going to go on to play a very pivotal role in future events of the story. And I'm very happy about this episode. It's legitimately good. And let's get into that. Like, how much content truly did they add? So, if you look at this episode and you scroll through it, you can go to chapter 28. This is chapter 28 of Solo Leveling, and basically Solo Leveling had the start of chapter 28 where we have this man, he's doing his kendo practice and all that, talking about the loss of his arm, which this episode of Solo Leveling does have. We have this whole moment where, he's talking about how, like, he might retire, but he's not, and that's, what we get at the beginning of chapter 28. And if you're wondering what happened in chapter 27, it's pretty much the fight at the entrance with Cerberus, with Jinwoo fighting the Cerberus in episode, 7. That's what, chapter 27's about. And the ending of it, there is content that was not shown in the latest episode Solo Leveling. The reason for that is because it's being restructured for next week's episode. It's very apparent. So don't go and look at chapter 27 if you're anime only, because there is going to be some spoilers that is going to be added in for next week. But anyways, getting back into it though, the chapter for, Solo Leveling, chapter 28, has this whole kendo practice going on and all that, this conversation, and as he goes out to get ready for a new event, he basically meets up with Jinwoo. And if you watch the episode, basically that's exactly what happens. For instance, after this little kendo practice, you have it to where, he goes on a walk, he meets Jinwoo and all that, and, they meet up at the dungeon. So all this content from basically like 17 minutes to like the ending of the episode is the actual content from chapter 28, and then this kendo practice stuff here, like with like 8 minutes to like I say let's look here, around 9 minutes, is pretty much also a part of the chapter. So if we give or take, looking at the time, we have about 5 minutes of actual content from chapter 28 here that was actually adapted, and the rest of the stuff, like the extra 14-15 minutes of the episode, is all anime original. Now, that is what's really shocking, because anyone watching this episode is going to be like, this looks like content that should have been there, but it wasn't. It was not in the web novel or web comic. Maybe it was in the web novel, and let me clarify a few things, because people have been asking me this question. I have read the web novel of Solo Leveling, but I haven't read every single bit of the web novel, and to clarify that, basically, I started reading the web novel when I caught up to, chapter 58, 60 of, the webcomic of Solo Leveling. I didn't want to wait for more chapters, so I just dived straight into the web novel. That's exactly what I did. So, yeah, to give clarification, I haven't read the early stuff of Solo Leveling. But I know for a fact that this isn't in the webcomic because I literally just showed proof of that. So this stuff is legitimately amazing that this was added in and giving us this characterization of characters that, kind of explain, like, what has happened, the world of Solo Leveling, how people react to certain dungeons after they fail or succeed. It's great. This is great characterization, and I'm all for this. It's something that I felt was very lacking within the webcomic and all that, and actually seeing this here makes me very happy, because this is a very interesting moment. These characters all meeting up at the end of the episode to actually go back into a dungeon, it's fascinating because it's like, they have some history. A lot of these characters left our main MC to die in the dungeon without a leg, bleeding out, and they all feel guilt. There's just different emotions kind of going around in this group, and so I like that. Even having this main female character kind of reappearing once again, and basically having, like, more of a, characterization and development within this episode, I'm all for. Like, we literally have this moment within the episode. Let me see if I can find it. I don't know exactly the time, but there's, right here. So this moment right here, that once again, this was not in the webcomic. And you see this little moment where she's talking on the phone, and you could just see the overall depression in her face. It's really nice. The way this is drawn and the character acting with just the art alone and the voice acting really is easily one of my favorite moments of the episode. Like, this is. Now, I do think that maybe the voice lines could have been delivered a little bit better, but I do think that the way this showcases, like, her decision-making, for instance, like, the weight and guilt of being a hunter. Even a B-rank hunter can feel inadequate or weak, like they can't do anything. It's a really good moment for her. Like, it's a great character-building moment, and I love the lighting as well. The lighting tells a lot. She's just depressed, sitting on the bed, wondering what she can do. The phone drawing here, like, oh, I love this visual here with the phone. It looks very simple at first glance, but the way the shading, the lighting is, it's just, there was a lot of work put into this scene alone. It didn't need to be this good. It didn't. Like, this could have been just a little setup episode, trying to extend it, get into the dungeon a little bit. That's what they could have done. For instance, they could have just tried to extend these scenes right here, which they kind of did technically do, but they could have just, straight up done like an episode, tried to just do this content, a little bit of chapter 29, and that's about it. But they didn't want to do that. They wanted to end the episode literally where they were going to go into the dungeon and all that, and I like that. I don't know, I love the decision making. Whoever directed this episode and was making the decisions behind the scenes to do these little moments and stuff with the characters, good job on them. I think that I'm just gonna be honest, this is better than webcomic. Like, there's literally no comparison. I know people are gonna, have a hissy fit and be upset with this episode because it doesn't have action, but I think that we need these episodes to actually have development, and I don't just want a fighting fest. I don't want that. Like, don't get me wrong, I love some meat-headed type stuff, like just characters going at each other, beating the crap out of each other. I enjoy that stuff. I'm not gonna lie. I'm also the same type of person that just loves a cutesy anime where characters are holding hands and kissing each other. I'm not that picky when it comes to things, but I do like my fighting shows to also have some depth to them, not just be fighting. So, like, I'm happy we got this episode, and once again, whoever directed this episode, whoever was storyboarding this episode and came with the idea, let's add this anime original content in, good job on you. You did a good job. Like, honestly, I want you to work on more episodes because this was great. It might not have been the most flashy episode with fighting and all of that and music and stuff, but I think legitimately we need episodes like this to break the tension and to be able to give more depth to the world. Now, arguably, I can see why people would be upset with this episode, though, not just because it lacks action, but after last week's episode, which was a recap, 7.5, people are going to be craving for more, and going right into this slow-paced episode definitely will probably piss off a lot of people, but that happens. You can't win everybody over, but yeah, overall, Solo Leveling fans, we're winning right now. This is legitimately better than the webcomic, and I think that overall, I'm satisfied. If they continue doing this, I think that any issue that people truly have with Solo Leveling, like one of the biggest issues, is going to be fixed, like, straight up. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. May all of you have a fantastic day or night wherever you live. Be safe, stay healthy, and I love you guys. Chibi out.